This is a Poker Fraud Alert radio special. This is an interview with my friend Trevor Garner, who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And on March 21st, 2025, I went down to the hospital and I visited him and I recorded about an hour-long interview with him, mostly regarding a weird battle he had with an LA area radio host that's actually quite well known, who just attacked him through the legal system for a very flimsy and stupid reason. So I thought that the audience here would enjoy hearing that whole saga, because I've never told it before on radio. And also, I just wanted to introduce you all to Trevor, because I knew he did not have much time left. And indeed, 3 days after I came to visit him, he passed away in the early morning of March 24th, 2025. Trevor was only 59 years old. He had just turned 59 in January. So, indeed, this is very sad to lose him this early. Anyway, I had planned to make this part of a Poker Fraud Alert radio show, and it's still going to be part of one, but I'm also releasing it on its own. So you can get to know Trevor here. A few of you already knew him. The rest of you, he's probably new to you. Unfortunately, by the time you hear this, Trevor is already gone. But he was very aware that it's possible this would be posted after he was gone. And this is the final interview ever done with him. As I said, he passed away 3 days later, which frankly was a surprise. I thought he had a little more time left than that, but apparently he did not. So here comes the interview. As I said, it's about an hour. Nothing to do with poker or gambling, but I bet you'll find it interesting. Okay, so this is the first time I'm doing this, and this is being pre-recorded, this segment. But I am here actually at a hospital in Orange County, and I'm with my friend Trevor Garner. And you guys don't know him, most of you, because he's not involved with poker, he's not involved with gambling, he doesn't live in Las Vegas. But he's someone I've known for about 15 years. And I know him from kind of like the radio world, and there's an interesting story involving him, and I had a little part in it, but I've never talked about it before. And it involves actually a major LA radio personality, who's not anymore, but a major former LA radio personality. And a very shitty thing that was done to Trevor by this personality. And it's a very interesting story. And I've been tempted to tell it out here before, but I just didn't. And I think now is the time, because unfortunately, Trevor has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And he's 59 years old. I'm here visiting him in the hospital, and he doesn't have much time left. And I wanted to tell this story here and interview him about this from his room, and have him tell you some parts. I'll tell you most of it because it's easier for me to talk. He's very sick right now. But I wanted this story out, and I thought that's a good thing to put out there to introduce him to the Poker Fraud Alert audience. So the person I'm talking about, the radio host, the LA radio host, who also was heard in some other markets like Seattle, is Tom Leykis. And Tom Leykis, he had a fairly long career in radio. And at first he just kind of ran generic sort of political talk shows in LA, but he really reached his stride with a show he had on a station called KLSX 97.1, which became Talk at some point in the 90s. And the format of that show is basically him giving advice to young men about getting women and not spending money on them and getting laid and not letting women take advantage of you. By modern day standards, it would be considered a misogynistic show. Even I noticed that at the time. You guys know I'm no feminist, but even at the time I noticed that it seemed like he hated women. It seemed like a lot of the advice I found kind of dishonest and really was kind of nasty as far as what he was telling men to do with women. Even if some of the stuff worked, it's like stuff I would not do myself, and it was things that I could understand why it could appeal to some guys, especially ones that were having trouble getting women to date them or have sex with them or whatever it might be. But that he caught on with that, and he developed a fairly big following, and he took a lot of calls during the show, and some people became big fans of his. Anyway.
Like me.
Yeah, so here, that's right. I never introduced Trevor. Here, Trevor, say hello to the audience here.
Hello, audience. This is Trevor Garner, trevorshappyhour.com.
Yes, that's what he runs, is trevorshappyhour.com, and you're going to hear about this during the segment, where that was a small internet podcast and also live show, kind of like this one in a way. That figured into his issues with Tom Leykis, or shall I say Tom Leykis' issues with him. So anyway, Trevor started Trevor's Happy Hour. He had originally started it on a radio station basically with no signal where he used to work in San Bernardino. It's called KCAA. Eventually, he had a falling out with the owner there where Trevor was in the right, and he took his show off there and just moved it to the internet. And the show ran fairly frequently. It would run several times a week, right?
My show?
Yeah.
Well, I got to talk about something.
Yes.
First of all, as far as Tom Leykis is concerned, I was a big fan.
As Trevor said, he was a big fan of Tom Leykis, as he wasn't someone who had disdain for him or didn't like him or anything like that.
I want to work with him.
Yeah, he actually kind of a dream about maybe working with him, doing a show together. So, and by this point, by the way, Tom was no longer on the radio in the mid-2010s. Tom had a podcast himself. Tom was long off the radio. He claimed it was his choice. I kind of think he couldn't get a job that he felt was worth his time, because he was getting paid very well in the 90s and 2000s. And then once KLSX switched formats and was no longer talk, he was basically just off the radio. And yeah, he could have gotten a job in like a small market, but he didn't want to do that.
CBS was paying him out of his contract.
Yeah, that's right. And he was also being paid for the end of his contract, because his contract went longer than the station did, and they had to legally pay him. They couldn't break the contract since they're the ones who shut the station off for talk. So anyway, but even when that contract was over, he didn't seem to be really seeking out a radio job. He seemed happy to do the podcast. And yeah, he got a smaller audience, but he still had a decent sized audience, and it was free. And then he also had a pay version of it where you could get access to the archives of the show and I guess some other features. So he was doing various things for money. He had these little meetups where, you'd go have dinner with him and it'd be way marked up, like at a restaurant. But yeah, he was supporting himself that way. And I think he saved a lot of money over time. So he had good money. He even had like a winery he built somewhere. So this was not a radio guy who blew all his money. This was a guy who seemed to be pretty smart with money and seemed to be doing well and seemed to be wealthy, and just did not want to go to a small market and kind of downgrade and work for peanuts, which I guess is understandable, especially because he was an older guy. So this is where he and Trevor ended up clashing, though. Trevor likes to drink. And Trevor, for really most of his life, was drinking very heavily. He loved drinking. He went to the bars all the time. And that's why the show was called Trevor's Happy Hour, because it was a play on the fact that he's always drinking.
And my listeners.
Yeah, and his listeners were drinking a lot too, and the co-host. But a lot of times on the show, because I came on sometimes as a guest, Trevor wasn't drunk, or at least he didn't come off drunk. Were you drunk all the time on the show, or it didn't seem like it to me?
Well, it depends on my blood alcohol level, but, I was sometimes, I didn't drink that much, and it was hit and miss. I don't know.
What blood alcohol level did you need to, appear drunk to people?
0.15.
Oh, that's pretty high. Okay, so, but yeah, it's believable he had a tolerance. So he was drunk on a particular night, and he called up Tom Leykis, and one of our mutual friends had his phone number, which I forgot how, but Tom Leykis' his personal number. Trevor called him for the very first time on that personal number, and basically was just going to talk. It wasn't a hostile call. It wasn't going to be anything harassing or threatening or anything like that. He had no reason to do that. He liked Tom Leykis. He was a fan of his.
One more fact: I was on with Craig McElvaney. I was on with Zombie Wolf. They were on the call too. So
yeah, and there were other people on there too. Yeah. So the first time you called him, he answered the phone, right?
Yes.
And what did he say when he answered the phone?
Hello.
Well, beyond hello.
Do I know you? I said, my name is Trevor. I said, you know me. So I was a producer for Poor Man, or something to that effect. And he goes, I don't think I know you. I don't know, something like that. I said, well, Tom, I wanted to know if I could work with you. And he goes, I'm writing a book right now. I'm going to have to get back with you. He didn't even say that. He goes, I'll talk to you later, Trevor. And I go, okay, click. That was about it.
Yeah, and that's very important, because the only time they actually had a conversation on the phone, it ended with Tom saying, hey, I'm busy right now writing a book. I'll talk to you later. It wasn't, hey, I don't know you. Please don't call me again. Nothing like that. It was actually ended with, I'll talk to you later. Now, even if Tom didn't plan to talk to him later, he did not say that to Trevor. He just said, hey, I'm busy writing a book right now. I'll talk to you later. So then, Trevor, you called back. When was it you called back after that?
Next day.
The next day he called back.
he called back 2 times and left messages on Tom's voicemail, and he was very drunk at that point. And he was at first saying, "Hey, I'd like to work with you. Let's do a show together." And then at one point said, "I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you."
In a radio way, like Imus and Stern.
Yeah. So what he meant was, "I'm coming for you. Like, I have this show, my own show, Trevor's Happy Hour. I'm coming for your show. I'm going to become more popular than yours. So you should work with me, because otherwise I'll be coming for you in the ratings." That's what he meant. And I'll tell you, I've known Trevor for 15 years. He's never made any threats to anybody. He's never stalked anybody. He's never done anything. He's not that guy who would threaten people or try to make them physically scared. The "I'm coming for you" that really meant, "I'm coming for your show. My show's going to beat yours, so let's work together." That's what he was trying to say, and he was drunk, and it didn't come out well. So Tom claimed at that point that he was scared, that he thought these were death threats. And I'll tell you why that's not true. I'll tell you why I don't believe that for a second. Tom had a very hard time with internet criticism. Tom was an older guy. He didn't quite get how the internet worked, yet he was actively on social media, but he didn't quite get how it all worked. He didn't quite get that if you are a well-known radio personality in the LA market, even one that was a former personality there, and you still have a show, that you're going to have people who criticize your show, who criticize you. You're going to have haters, and that's how it goes.
He used to take calls, and there was a guy who called in. He goes, "Tom, I'm going to get you, buddy." And he's like, "Ha ha, what's your name?" And he would actually get threats on that video from people, but he didn't take it serious. He took this serious because he wanted to get ratings for his stuff.
Yeah, that is interesting that he would actually take calls on his show from people who said they're going to come for him, and he would just kind of laugh it off, and then Trevor leaves 2 messages. But I'll get to my theory as to what he was really doing there, why he claimed to be so scared of Trevor. So Tom, as I said, was having a very hard time dealing with criticism on the internet, because you're going to have that. I mean, I get criticism about my show. You guys see that. I get criticism all the time. I get people bashing me. I have people hating on me. It's part of the whole thing that goes with having a presence on the internet. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't have a presence. You should not do a show that's broadcast on the internet, or you shouldn't do a show at all anywhere if you're going to get mad that people on the internet go there and say bad things about you and your show, because that's just part of it. You can be a private person and avoid that, but he's choosing not to, just like I'm choosing not to. So you have to understand that. Of course, it has to stop somewhere. You can't have people stalking you. You can't have people threatening you. You can't have people doing things to you. But as far as criticizing you and saying bad things about you and criticizing your show, that's all par for the course. And it's a very simple solution. If you don't like that, just don't do your show.
Right. And somebody tried to attack him when he came out of a restaurant once, and he put that in there about being attacked. He was already threatened before, and somebody physically actually came after him.
Yeah, and that was many years ago. That was when he was on the regular terrestrial radio in Seattle. He did get attacked outside a bar. He got some kind of minor injuries. I think he got like punched in the face and had to have some stitches. He didn't even press charges on the guy, which is interesting, because like, here's someone who actually came up, a stranger just came up who knew him from the show, and came up and punched him in the face, just sucker punched him in the face. And I think Tom had to have stitches, and Tom could have definitely pressed charges and sued the guy, and he did nothing to him. This is someone who actually did something that would have deserved any kind of lawsuit or criminal charges, and Tom chose not to. But and this was many years before Trevor's call to him. This is, I think, in the early 2000s. But anyway, you can look it up. It's all on the internet. The reason I believe that Tom got so outraged at Trevor wasn't because he was worried that he was going to be attacked in any way by Trevor. He was very angry and frustrated with this group that was making fun of him on Facebook. And he erroneously believed that Trevor was part of this group, which Trevor was not. Trevor was not in that group. Trevor had nothing to do with these people. He knew one or two from other places, but Trevor never joined that group, never said anything bad about Tom. The few things that Trevor would say about Tom was actually very positive. And he was a fan of his, and not like a deranged, crazy fan. He was just a fan.
I never even listened to his show anymore, so I wasn't even part of I wasn't even a listener of his anymore, really.
Yeah, that's true. He wasn't even listening to the podcast format of Tom's show. So there were, trolls on Facebook that were making fun of Tom and his show, but that's the way it goes. But Trevor wasn't even one of them. But Tom not only believed that Trevor was one of them, he thought Trevor was the ringleader of them. And it was just like decided. He had no evidence of this. He just decided, if Trevor's calling him like this, Trevor must be the ringleader of the haters on Facebook, and he's going to show them. So Tom had an attorney who was advertising on his show, and paying a lot of money for it. He was the main sponsor of this attorney. So Tom spoke to this attorney, and this attorney suggested, hey, actually, I don't know who came up with the idea. Maybe it was Tom, maybe the attorney, maybe both together. This part I don't know. But they came up with oh, you know who came up with the idea?
That same night that I made that phone call, the last one, I get a phone call on my cell. It was Brian. It was Ball Sacks. He said, "You're in big trouble, dude." He goes, "You don't ever threaten somebody with the kind of money Tom Leykis has." And he says, "We're going to serve you papers, and you're going to be in big trouble, dude." And then I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You just see it, watch and see." And then he hung up.
Yeah, so this attorney was basically saying that this is too late, that the wheels are now in motion to come after Trevor legally in a very, very aggressive fashion with basically very frivolous lawsuits. At first, a frivolous restraining order, and then it was going to be followed by a frivolous civil suit for millions of dollars. And the goal, and I know this goal because I spoke to this attorney, so I tried to kind of play middleman here. I had nothing to do with any of this prior to this. I wasn't on the phone call. I didn't know about the phone call until after it was done, but I was told the whole story, and I thought, okay, I will try to be like a mediator and see if I can reason with this attorney, because at the time I thought, maybe just legitimately they thought Trevor was a threat. So I spoke to this attorney and I said to him, look, I've spoken to Trevor. He's never going to call Tom again. As far as he knew, Tom was fine with getting more calls. I said, well, I'll talk to you later. But he's not going to do it again. He's not going to make any calls. The things that you're saying were threats were really not threats. And I explained what it was. And I said, look, I promise he'll never hear from Trevor ever again. And if you think it's a lie, then just wait and see what happens. If Trevor keeps bothering him, then take action. But let's just everybody walk away peacefully. Nothing's happened here. No one's done anything to anybody. It just makes sense for everyone to walk away. And it did. But the attorney was very insistent that I was incorrect, that Trevor was the ringleader of this group. I said, I know this group. This group is not, Trevor's not even part of it. He has nothing to do with that group. So no matter what I said to this attorney, he wouldn't believe that Trevor wasn't the ringleader of this group. He wouldn't believe that this wasn't a threatening phone call. He basically just said, look, it's going to happen. There's going to be a restraining order. And then when the restraining order is granted, then we're going to move on to a civil suit. There's nothing you can do to stop it. It's happening. Too bad. And it did.
Now I'm going to play you guys a little clip from two shows that Tom Leykis did that pretty much confirms what I'm saying. Just in case you're doubting us here, just in case you think maybe Trevor was stalking the guy and this whole thing wasn't really about scaring away critics on the internet. I'm going to play you first a clip, a very short clip from October of 2016, where he was complaining about the trolls. And then you'll hear 2 months later, after the restraining order was granted against Trevor, you'll hear what he had to say about that and how he puts out the warning to the other people that were criticizing him. Notice he was not saying these people were harassing him, just that these same people were criticizing him on the internet, and that he's coming after them too, that they're getting Trevor first, and then everybody else is going to fall as well.
Like what I do, shouldn't be listening to it. And you'd be amazed if you could see the number of people who purport to hate me or hate what I do or hate my business model. You'd be amazed how many of them get together on the internet and talk about me every day. What I'm saying right now, they'll be talking about tonight. And can you see how pathetic you are when you do that? Can you see how desperate are you? Most of you are adults. None of you act like adults, but most of you are over the age of 21. And there you are out there every single day. Many of you are the people we have blocked from our Facebook page or blocked from our phone number. And there you are out there every day for years and years now.
Now here's a clip from 2 months later where he's telling these same people that they better watch out because look what happened to Trevor.
And so that's what we're doing here. We're going to do everything we can to restrain this guy from harassing me or haranguing me or stalking me in any way. And it's a message to all the other motherfuckers out there, and there's about 6 of you, and we know your names. We know where you all live. Some of you have been served with paperwork by us.
And you know who you are.
You know who you are, and I want you all to know that what I did today is just the beginning. I'm going after you guys one after another with every legal means available in my arsenal. I will use whatever we have. That is it.
So as you see, that's what this was really about. It was not about fear of Trevor. It was not worrying that Trevor's going to keep harassing him. Trevor made 2 phone calls. That was it. This was about stopping what he believed were internet trolls criticizing his show.
And it was always the whole thing came in a ball sack's mouth. That's what I called him. You can tell him why, because it pissed him off. But anyways, what came out of his mouth was, you don't fuck with somebody who has as much money as Tom had. He kept touting that, how much money Tom has, and he's going to get you. You better watch out. That's what he kept saying.
The name ball sacks you keep hearing Trevor mention is a morphing of the attorney's actual name, and called him ball sacks just to irritate him, and it seemed to get the guy mad. But anyway, that's what Trevor's talking about. But regarding this attorney,
also, he basically gave me the whole game plan. So he said to me that they're not going to take this anymore, that Tom is sick of these trolls harassing him on Facebook. But again, nobody was harassing him. They were just criticizing his show. They were criticizing him, but that Tom's not going to take this anymore, and an example is going to be made of someone, and that someone is Trevor. So basically, he's saying Tom has deep pockets, and he's going to keep pressing this, and maybe if Trevor's lucky, he'll be let off with settling for something like $20,000 or $30,000. So basically, what the plan was that, and this is what they believed would happen. First, they get a restraining order based on bogus information, which we'll get to shortly. And then after the restraining order is granted, then it can kind of be like a stepping stone to validate the civil suit, which is going to be filed for a scary amount of money for $5 million. And then Trevor would settle for 20 or 30K, and then all the trolls on Facebook would be very, very scared that Trevor from 2 phone calls had to pay 30K, and they would be afraid to ever say anything bad about Tom ever again. So the restraining order was then filed, and it was served. The funny thing is that the service was actually not done properly the first time. Someone just dropped it at the door.
I was dodging it.
Trevor knew it was coming because they told us it was coming, so Trevor was actually dodging it, which I don't blame him because it was a frivolous suit. So he was dodging service. He wouldn't come to the door. The process server claimed that he did serve Trevor.
He dropped it at the door. My mom picked it up, and she brought it to me and said, "What is this paper?" And I go, "Oh, man." And me and Wally Wharton and Zombie were in the same room talking about things. They had come out to see me. And they started going through it. And they go, "Oh, man, Tom's going to get you, dude." I go, and this is Zombie goes, "Don't worry about it. He's smoking his pot." And Wally Wharton was really scared because she might lose her house over this, because it says it named like other people in the suit. What is it with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And she said she thought she was a part of it. And why did I get her involved in this? Like, I don't want nothing to do with you, Trevor, anymore. You're in big trouble, mister. So go ahead.
The surprising thing, and Trevor actually he hired an attorney for this to defend him as someone he already knew. So the restraining order case, I was saying at first, I can't see how this would succeed, because some of you may not know this. Some of you may have never been part of a restraining order case, either as a plaintiff or a defendant. But what I can tell you is restraining orders are not just granted because you don't want to talk to someone anymore. You don't want someone to call you anymore. Basically, you have to show the judge a persistent pattern of harassment where you're either getting threats or where the person just will absolutely not leave you alone. So if someone makes a few phone calls to you that upset you, you're not going to get a restraining order. Even if it's like semi-threatening, you're not going to get a restraining order granted. Like, let's say someone calls me and says, "Hey, Todd, I think you're an asshole. Next time I see you, I'm going to kick your ass." And I hang up. Then they call back and say, "No, seriously, Todd, if I see you again, I'm going to kick your ass." And then I hang up. And then I get a restraining order against them. That's not going to be granted based on that, because they made 2 phone calls, and even though they said they're going to kick my ass, they wouldn't get the restraining order granted just based on 2 calls. Now, if the person called over and over and over and said that, or if the threats escalated to something like, "I'm going to shoot you," then maybe I would. But the thing is, it has to be a pretty serious or ongoing matter to get the restraining order granted. You can't just say, "I don't feel like hearing from this person," give them a restraining order, because it goes on their record. When they go for employment, it can come up. So it's something that's not just handed out lightly. Now, sometimes they are handed out erroneously by judges, and sometimes judges don't grant them when they should. If you guys remember on this show, we're not going to go into this again, but when Christopher Mitchell got that restraining order against Lee Bradbury, that was very frivolous. That was a ridiculous one. In fact, he was accusing Lee of something that someone else did, and Lee could prove it, and that was a total miscarriage of justice, and Lee had to spend extra money to get that overturned. So as you see, the restraining order cases can really go sideways, and a lot of times they're not adjudicated properly. But anyway, this went to court, and unfortunately, Tom had some assistants of his that had been working with him for a long time lie on the stand and say that Trevor was calling the show hundreds of times and spoofing numbers And Trevor doesn't know how to do this. Trevor's not a technical guy. Like everything on his show, people had to show him how to do. He's not technical at all. People had to teach him how to do everything technically. For example, I'm over here right now, and Trevor has a little bit of Bitcoin that he wants to sell before his inevitable passing, which is going to be coming soon. And so I was assisting him with it, but he had no idea how to do that. Like that had to be shown step by step. So this is not a guy who's going to spoof numbers. And they had no proof he was spoofing numbers. They just said, here's a bunch of calls we got. And these were spoofed by Trevor. They were really him. They had no recordings. They had no proof. It was just saying Trevor did it. People who've been working for Tom for like 20 years. So obviously these are people who are very biased and are going to have an incentive to say what he wants them to say. So these people just blatantly lied on the stand. And unfortunately, the judge pretty much bought it, and especially when the tapes were played in court of those messages, which were legal to play in court because Trevor left the messages on the voicemail. In California, you can't record anyone on the phone and use that in any court proceedings, but if someone knowingly leaves you a message, that can be used. So that was played in court, and the judge was not convinced by Trevor's counter-argument that he meant, I'm just coming for you in a radio sense. And had it just been 2 phone calls, it would have been granted. But because of that bullshit testimony that Trevor had made hundreds of calls harassing the show, which he definitely didn't. In fact, Trevor even printed the phone bills and was trying to show on the phone bills he didn't do this. They weren't interested in seeing. The judge was not interested in seeing, and granted the restraining order. So that was a bad start. And at that point, Tom and his attorney were very, very pumped up, shall I say. They went on the show. They bragged about it. They were really believing this is the first win of many.
That was the first win of many, except that was the first time I went into the court with Scott DeHaan, my lawyer, and I started calling him ball sacks. And he got really mad about that. And then he got the restraining order, but he asked the judge for his fees, $6,800. And the judge...
I was going to get to that. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to interrupt you, but I know you have limited energy to talk. But yeah, so they had a separate hearing for the attorney to get his fees. And the attorney was asking for $6,800 or something around the number, $60-something $100, which is excessive for attorneys to get in a restraining order case, a simple restraining order case. Usually they're granted somewhere like in the low 2000s, at least back then. This is 2017. So I was very pessimistic. I remember I was in Lake Tahoe skiing at the time, and I was just really not feeling good. I just thought this was going to be the first in a series of losses that Trevor's going to have that are unfair, because the first one was totally unfair. And it was the same judge who was going to be deciding whether the attorney gets his fees of $6,800, which the same judge already decided this restraining order was granted when it shouldn't have been. It definitely shouldn't have been. So I thought, well, he's probably going to win the fees too, and that's going to pump him up even more, and they're going to be even more motivated to keep going with what they're doing. Well, shockingly, he got zero. And the attorney said that...
He cried. He's like, Judge, I have to get my fees. And that's when I started to taunt him. And my lawyer put me in a headlock and said, get out of here, we won. And I said, because I was just laughing at him. And I was like, and he was getting so steamed because I would just call him ball sacks. And that's when, the lawyer got me out of there. But I'm going to say this because I'm still on morphine, but somewhere along the line, the TMZ thing came up. Todd will fill that in. I don't know where it came in.
Yeah. So what happened in this restraining order, the attorney was basically saying, I need my fees. I need to get paid for my work. And we gave Trevor every opportunity to just accept the restraining order, and we were not going to hit him for the fees, because that was the only offer that was made as far as settling. They weren't going to drop it. Remember, I offered on behalf of Trevor. Trevor's never going to call him again. Never, ever, ever have any call, contact, whatever. They'll never contact him again in any way, shape, or form. They were not interested in that because they wanted to make an example of him. So anyway, their offer was, oh, no, the restraining order is going to happen, but if you accept the restraining order, then we won't go after you for the fees. And he wouldn't accept that. He fought it. So the attorney said in court, we gave him every chance to just accept it, and we weren't going to go after the fees, so he wouldn't accept it. So, yeah, of course they deserve the fees. The judge didn't like that. The judge said, wait a minute, you're saying that he didn't deserve his day in court? You're saying that even though this can affect his employment, that he should not have a day in court, and that he should have accepted your offer for a restraining order he didn't agree with just to avoid the fees? That doesn't sound right to me. So at that moment, he lost the fees. The judge had decided right then he's getting zero and gave him zero. Now, the funny thing is, she was probably also pissed that he asked for over $6,000, and probably that statement also pissed her off. I think that was the main thing. But she decided she's done with this whole thing. She's going to keep the restraining order in place, but zero fees. So that was the first defeat they had, and they were kind of surprised by it because it was the same judge that gave them the victory the first time. Now they had a defeat. So I was shocked. I remember I was driving back from Lake Tahoe, and the weather wasn't very good, and I was on a windy road, but I got some good news for Trevor that the fees were completely denied. And I said, great, okay, good. Now, by this point, the civil suit had already been filed too. So there was still the $5 million civil suit that Trevor had to deal with. And most obnoxiously, Trevor's mother was named in the suit. So it was his mother, him, some kind of family trust, and then a bunch of John Does that could be added later.
Because I was taking care of my mother in her house, and she's elderly. I was taking care of her, and that's where the calls were made. So my mother's somehow involved in this.
Yeah, so yeah, the backstory to this with Trevor, why he was living with his mom. His mother had dementia and needed someone to take care of her, and Trevor was doing that. So because it was determined that's where Trevor lived, which is true, that's where he was living, that they decided they're going to just go after her and a family trust that's associated with her, and that they were going to do this in order to kind of scare him further, that not only are they going after him, they're going after his mom. They were really hoping he was just going to settle again for $20 or $30K, and then they could wave this in the face of all the people criticizing Tom online, and then everyone would be afraid to ever say anything bad about Tom ever again. That was the fantasy they had of what would occur. However, they made a big mistake in including his mom, aside from the fact that it's really fucked up to do, given that his mom had no idea who Tom Leykis was. His mom had obviously nothing to do with any of this. His mom was elderly with dementia, and she's getting sued for harassing Tom Leykis. I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, there's no precedent to do this. Just because Trevor's living there taking care of her, even if he was guilty of something, you can't successfully sue her, but they did. Well, that ended up being their undoing indirectly, because this was her house. This wasn't Trevor's house.
I was coming home from the lawsuit one day just to show up. And I was coming home on the Metrolink, and I started to think, I go, if he's going after my mom's house, State Farm Insurance might have a policy to cover her in case of a lawsuit. I called him up, and he said, we've never had anything like this before, but we'll look into it, and I'll run it by my people. And sure enough, we had like some sort of umbrella policy that covered a lawsuit that was going against the house or my mom, and they accepted it. He goes, dude, I got it accepted. The insurance guy said, I got it accepted. We'll pay your legal fees. So that's where it is, because it was my mom's house.
Yeah, so basically at this point, now Trevor was in the driver's seat. First of all, there's a very frivolous case. This civil case, when I read the filing, I was like, okay, this is the flimsiest case ever. There's no way this is ever going to win. There's no way a jury's ever going to find against Trevor here and award money to Tom Leykis for this whole thing. Like, it was just so frivolous. And now that Trevor no longer had to worry about just being buried in legal fees, which otherwise he would have had to worry about that, but now that the insurance company has agreed to cover any legal fees he incurs on this, Trevor went out and hired a law firm in Los Angeles, and basically the money was being directly paid by the insurance company. And now it's true, Tom probably was not paying his attorney because this is probably being done on a contingency basis, but still, they no longer had the strength of, okay, we're going to keep just pressing this until you are buried in legal fees and just agree to settle for something just to make it go away, because Trevor didn't care if it went away. I mean, he cared. He didn't want this to continue, but financially he didn't have to care, and that was a big burden off of his back.
Yes. I dropped Scott DeHaan, got this guy who was like $200, $30 an hour lawyer, and because I was going to make sure that we got a good lawyer. Adley, I don't know, I just found him somewhere. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, so he got these downtown LA lawyers, and they filed a response, and I read the response. It was a pretty good response. I liked the response that they wrote back, and basically they just took the posture of, no, this is frivolous, this is bullshit, we're going to fight it, and they filed an anti-SLAPP, which you guys are familiar with because that's exactly what I did in the Mike Postle situation, where I was sued for defamation of Mike Postle when he was accused of the cheating, and I ended up winning that, as you guys all know. I won't go into that story again, but with an anti-SLAPP, that's a motion you file to have a lawsuit dismissed based upon the allegation that the lawsuit is being filed to chill your speech. Basically, it's a frivolous lawsuit to shut you up. And this way you can get it dismissed much earlier and much more cheaply, though it's still never that cheap, but much more cheaply and much earlier than otherwise you'd have to if the whole thing went further. So if the anti-SLAPP succeeds, not only does the whole thing get dismissed and can't be refiled, but also the other side owes you your attorney's fees. So while Trevor wasn't paying the attorney's fees because it was coming out of his insurance, it would be some satisfaction that Tom would now have to pay the attorney's fees for what the insurance had incurred. So anyway, I'm sure that they were very confused on Tom Leykis' end how Trevor had all this money to just keep fighting back at this. And this thing dragged on for a while.
When you called me on the phone and said, dude, you're in TMZ, and you never got into that part.
Yeah, that's right. So that's true. Trevor's on TMZ. You can go Google it. His name's Trevor Garner, and you can Google it. And by the way, when you read it, it's not true. Like, what's being said is not true. The only thing's true is he made those phone calls, but they had some connection to TMZ because of Tom Leykis' notoriety in the 90s and 2000s. So they reached someone there at TMZ and told them the story that they have an obsessed fan, that Tom has an obsessed fan, and had to get a restraining order against him. And because the restraining order had been granted, they were actually able to legally print Trevor's name. Didn't have a picture of him, but legally print Trevor's name as the obsessed fan on TMZ who was harassing and stalking Tom Leykis, which was so not true. There were 2 phone calls that I already described to you. It was such a lie. Well, Trevor actually took this in good humor and actually incorporated this into his show, and he made these T-shirts that, and in fact, there's a picture of me wearing one of them, where it says Trevor's Happy Hour on the front, and then it says official obsessed fan.
And a picture of Tom Leykis.
And a character of Tom.
Molly Wharton Drew.
Yeah.
We were in court.
That's right.
In court. That was his profile in court, and she was sketching him because she's a drawer.
That's right. This was Wally Wharton. She's an artist, and she drew kind of a funny picture of Tom Leykis in court, and they used that picture that she drew for the T-shirt, saying "official obsessed fan of Trevor's Happy Hour." So he kind of leaned into it. The other funny thing was when Tom tried to direct everyone on his Facebook page to go to Trevor's page and harass him, Trevor changed his banner on Facebook to be a promo for his show. Come listen to Trevor's Happy Hour, and had the URL of it. So he was kind of trolling him back with all this crap he was doing here.
You get TMZ to let me file a response. If you read at the top, there's a response that I wrote, but I didn't write it. Scott DeHaan wrote it for me, and it says something about I liked his fatness, PHATNESS, and bugs. He had bugs in his wine, and that was all part of the thing too.
Yeah, and so the bugs in the wine, yeah, that's kind of a funny thing that happened through this. So I don't know, maybe Trevor can explain this now. One time when Tom Leykis' name was brought up, Trevor said, "Oh, Tom has bugs in his wine." Now, it is true. It is true that Tom makes wine made wine at his vineyard that he owns in Central California. But I don't know why Trevor, I think he was just drunk. He just said offhandedly, Tom has bugs in his wine. And
I've got all the recordings. You gave them to me. They're all recorded on Irving's computer, my computer. It was a joke because I heard on some show that all wine bottles have bugs in them somewhere.
Yeah, and it's actually true that there are tiny microscopic bugs. You can look this up that are in wine, and it's fine. It's not unhealthy for you. So he was kind of joking that there's cinnamon at the bottom of the wine bottles, and there's bugs in his wine because there's bugs in everybody's wine. But Tom took this so offensively, so that was part of the lawsuit too. But then there are all these different bugs in the wine jokes made on Trevor's show. So Trevor was kind of trying to troll him back and keeping good nature throughout this whole thing as much as he could. As you can imagine, it was very stressful, even though he wasn't paying the bills here for the attorneys. It was very stressful to have a $5 million lawsuit over his head that's being brought by a celebrity, because Tom is a local celebrity in LA. Everybody remembers him, around this age group, who was in LA in the 90s and 2000s, and to have that hanging over his head when he hadn't done anything wrong. And also this aimed at his mom, too, and his mom's house. And it was very stressful, as you might imagine. Picture if you were in his shoes, how you'd feel. So anyway, this kept dragging on, and then came the second turning point. So in April of, I think, 2017, I think this was when it was, and I remember listening to this show, and I was pretty shocked by it. On Tom's show, he and the attorney were going on and about this whole thing. And then Tom went on this whole rant about how Trevor is crying about what's happening to him, and that this should be a message. This should be a message to all the trolls out there on the internet that he's going to come for you. If you may think that you can say what you want about him, but he's going to come for you legally, just like he's done against Trevor, and he's going to come get you. And he said, just stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine. But if you talk shit about me, and he could say this, he could say talk shit because he wasn't on the regular radio anymore. It was on a podcast that he did. He said, you talk shit about me, I'm going to come for you. So I'm paraphrasing. This isn't exact words, but I was like, wow, this is pretty much.
And I'm coming after your mother's house.
No, that's right. He said, I'll come after you. I'll come after your house. I'll come after your mother's house if I have to. So I go, wow, this is like textbook anti-SLAPP, because remember, the anti-SLAPP laws in California dismiss lawsuits that are filed strictly to chill speech. So here you had Tom on his own show, which of course could be used in court, stating just directly that he filed this lawsuit against Trevor to chill the speech of the people criticizing him online. I couldn't believe he was admitting that. So he didn't say those words, but it was very clear where he's saying, let this be a lesson to all of you. If you talk shit about me, I'll go after you. I'll take your house. I'll take your mother's house. And obviously that has to do with Trevor. He was even making fun of Trevor right before that about crying about this whole thing. So I go, wow, it's one thing to sue him to kind of give a subtle message to everybody else to never criticize him again, but to actually say, hey, look what's happening to this guy. You better stop criticizing me or I'm going to take your mom's house too. Wow.
Crying to mommy.
Yeah, that's right. He said you're going to be crying to mommy. So I'm like, wow, if that's played in court, that's going to look awful. It's going to look like a bully, a rich famous bully who is suing an innocent guy who doesn't have much to try to scare others on the internet for not criticizing his radio show. I was like, wow, that looks really awful if that ever gets to court. I called Trevor and I said, you know what, he really screwed himself here. There's no way he's going to win this now. Yeah, and we recorded it, and of course it could be used in court because this was on his public-facing podcast that was open to the public to listen for free. And of course, he knowingly recorded himself. So this isn't like recording him talking to his buddy in a restaurant. This was recording him on his own podcast, which could be played in court. This could directly be played in court. This would sound horrible to a jury. There's no way they would ever award him anything when that was heard. And in fact, the anti-SLAPP would be easily granted based on that. So I had a feeling that this was a huge turning point as well. And what happened next, I didn't expect. Now, Trevor gave it away a little bit, but I'll tell you what happened next. What happened next is all of a sudden, the lawyer was no longer welcome on the show. He used to come on like every Tuesday and do an hour-long segment, like an advertorial, and he was no longer welcome on the show. They actually read a statement that he was no longer welcome in the studio, and he was dropped as Tom's attorney. He was out of it, and Tom went and hired a new attorney that wasn't working for on contingency. He was working for like $900 an hour. That's some expensive attorney. So now Trevor was really in the driver's seat because now Tom no longer had his attorney working presumably on contingency. I never got proof of that, but it kind of seemed like it, and he had to just go hire a regular attorney. And the reason I'm just about sure this wasn't on contingency was a lot of reasons, but one of them is this was a horrible case. This was a very frivolous case. No attorney was going to take this on contingency that didn't already have a relationship with Tom.
And he's an expensive lawyer. Like, from what I found, he's like $800 an hour.
Yeah.
He's like one of those really high-end attorneys.
Yeah, so now Trevor's in the driver's seat. He's got his insurance company paying his lawyers, and then Tom has to pay his lawyer out of his own pocket now.
And that much, he must be scared.
Yeah, and so by this point, the anti-SLAPP had already been filed, and Tom was getting concerned. Now Tom was on the defensive because Tom realized that a lot of money had been run up defending this already, and that if the anti-SLAPP was granted, that Tom was going to end up having to pay a good sum of money to Trevor's lawyers, and maybe this could open up Trevor filing another lawsuit against him.
My whole point of view was the more he has to pay to his attorney, the better. I go, let him keep going, and I'll just say it. I kept coming back month after month when they said the next hearing's like on this date. I said, I'll see. I told his attorney, I go, I'll see you next month. I said, I'll see you next month. And it came up somewhere in there. He goes, Trevor, would you please stop making me take this man's money? That's what his lawyer said to me. He said, please settle for something. I said, no, I'll see you next month. Let him pay you.
Yeah, so he pretty much got himself trapped there, and the problem is he couldn't just drop it at that point because, one, he would lose the anti-SLAPP and owe all that money for the attorney's fees that a lot had been racked up.
And that's when I go, oh my gosh, I'm into something that's going to physically, mentally, and just hurt me. It was like but I can't stop. I got to keep going against this guy because I'll say it, I hated his guts. And it's like, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, and it was rightfully so why he hated his guts, because he just went after Trevor for the only reason, basically, is to scare others on the internet he didn't even know from stopping criticizing his radio show, which is crazy. So anyway, Trevor just kept on refusing to drop the whole thing on his end. He wouldn't drop the anti-slap. He and his mom would not agree not to sue Tom back for malicious prosecution here. And so he was worried about that too, especially the mother part, because there was no justification to sue the mother here, and that could be a successful case against him. So this dragged on for 2.5 years, as Trevor said. Now, what about Tom's show? Well, remember, the main sponsor was this original attorney who no longer was welcome there. And so we don't know what happened for sure, but my theory has always been that they had a big argument because this attorney was working probably on contingency, and he probably went to Tom and said, what the fuck did you just do? You just ruined our case here by saying what you did on the show. Now, no one's going to get paid. I did all this work for nothing. What the fuck? And then Tom probably said something like, look, this was your idea in the first place. They probably had a big fight. That's my guess. I don't know.
And that's when Tom pulled all of his segments, how many years was he on with Tom?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Pulled it all off of his website.
Yeah, there's a lot of work, too. He actually paid some of his assistants to go through 250 segments that this guy had been on and scrub those segments. They had to manually edit. There's no AI to do this for you back in those days. They had to manually edit 250 programs and scrub this guy's segments out. It was unbelievable how much hate that he and that attorney then had for each other over this. So obviously, that cash cow that was sponsoring Tom's show was out the window. And you may say, well, how much could this cost to produce? I do a podcast and it doesn't cost me much money. But Tom insisted on doing this with a real studio he was renting and with expensive equipment. He just couldn't get out of the old school radio mindset. So, and he had these assistants working with him as screeners. So it was costing him a good deal of money for this show, but he was able to cover it with what this attorney was paying to sponsor, a few other small sponsors, and then the subscriptions.
At that point, Todd, do you think that Leykis or Ballsex came up with the idea to sue me? Because he must have hated Ballsex so much to scrub those segments. It was why would he do that unless Ballsex came up with it? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's a good question of whose idea it was. I've always wondered which one of them came up with it. It may have been the attorney's idea to try this lawsuit. My kind of guess was that it was the attorney who came up with it, and that's, I think, maybe what the argument was. So they probably had a big fight about it where Tom said, hey, why did you get me into this mess? And then the attorney said, no, this wouldn't be a mess if you hadn't gone on the radio and screwed up. So that's probably where the fight was. But I have no confirmation of this. This is just my guess, just from observing the situation. So anyway, Trevor was definitely in the driver's seat at this point, and Tom was regretting this big time. His show no longer had its main sponsor. It was losing big money because it didn't have that main sponsor. And soon enough, the show went from something that was, similar to a professionally made radio show with screeners and a studio and everything like that, to kind of more a simple podcast that was behind a paywall that you had to subscribe to hear. So obviously his audience went way, 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 way down. It certainly wasn't as big as the audience he had on radio, but he had a decent audience for his podcast. But now the audience was way, way down because he had to pay to listen to it. And I think the studio was gone. And so the whole thing was pared way down. And this was all because he unsuccessfully went after Trevor like this and lost his main sponsor, which was the attorney. And now he was also facing, who knows how much he was going to be responsible for from possibly losing the anti-slap and possibly suits that were going to come forward. Well, that summer in 2017, indeed, the anti-slap was partially granted. I actually hoped it was going to be completely granted, but it was granted on certain counts, but not others. It helped Tom a little bit, but the problem was, here's what Tom had going for him. It was very little. He had some counts that were not dismissed by the anti-slap that he could go forward with, but they were all very weak. So the ones that weren't immediately dismissed, but they had no chance to win in front of a jury, and everybody knew it. Every competent attorney that would have seen this would have said that has no chance. So he knew he had a dog of a case. And Trevor, on the other hand, already had won the rights to some money from the anti-slap that was granted, the portions that were granted, and also might be able to bring, or at least his mother could bring, a malicious prosecution suit in the future. So he was very much in the driver's seat, Trevor, and of course he's not paying his own attorneys about this whole thing. So for 2.5 years, this dragged on, and Tom just kept saying, let's end it, let's end it, let's end it. Trevor's like, no, F you did this to me, you're good.
It took a lot out of me. I mean, I was so bored down, I had to quit. when I tried to put my mom in a home, it was like over. I couldn't take it mentally, physically, or anything. I was drinking through it, so.
It had kind of an anticlimactic ending, and they did sign a confidentiality agreement about what it's going to be, so you're not going to hear what the actual settlement was at the end. But Trevor, I don't believe he gave a penny to Tom. I'd be very shocked if he did.
No.
So the bottom line is that Trevor did not have to pay these attorneys in L.A. anything when the whole thing was said and done. Tom had to pay a fortune to that attorney that he hired in L.A. after the first one left. Trevor quit it because his mom had dementia. She was getting worse. This was stressful for her. It was stressful for him. She had to eventually be put in a home because of her condition deteriorating. And Trevor was just he had just so much going on in his life. He just got tired of dealing with it after 2.5 years, so he finally put an end to it, and it's understandable. And he was drinking a lot more because of it. And so
the court clerk would say that. He goes, like, when is this thing going to ever end? I mean, he was like, yeah, the court clerk says that at the end, and I started to think about it. And then on the last day that they offered again, the judge looked at me and goes, I don't know if you called Trevor or Mr. Garner. I mean, Mr. Garner, are you sure you want to end this? That's what she said, like almost like, I'm on your side, dude. So that's like, I go, oh, man, I got to keep going. And I thought about it. I was on my own then. Scott had quit. I was on my own going in there. He quit the whole thing, and I just took a deep breath. And I said, yeah, let's just end it.
Yeah, and there's one other thing I forgot to say. He didn't have attorneys at this point because once Trevor's mom was dropped out of the suit, which occurred, somewhat in the middle of this whole thing, the insurance company would not pay anymore because she was the only reason they were paying because it was her house. So then he was left on his own. So Trevor got that original attorney who helped him during the restraining order to give him some assistance there. But eventually Trevor just decided to go it alone and just, basically let the bills run up on Tom's end. Of course, Trevor's not an attorney himself, and he just from all the stress, he decided to put an end to the whole thing.
All by myself at that point. And I just had to say, I can't do it. I just can't do it no more.
So if you want to listen to Tom Leykis' show today, can you go pay to do it? Answer, no. Because eventually Tom realized, he's getting older, and he had a tiny audience because there was only people who paid to listen. And he realized he's broadcasting to very few people, and he doesn't need what little money it was generating, and it may have been losing money. So he just realized, why am I talking to almost nobody? I'm just going to quit. So he quit. That's the end of it. And I can't say this for sure because, I can't tell you what would have happened. I'm not psychic, but my guess is if he never went after Trevor in the first place, he would still be doing his show that he'd been doing, the podcast he had been doing for a long time. He'd still be doing it for free every day with the premium content being the archives there, and he'd still have that attorney paying a lot of money every month to advertise on there. It would be the status quo all the way. 9 years later, we'd be sitting with the same thing, or at least for several years. Maybe at this point he would have quit because he's gotten pretty old, but maybe not. The point is here, this would have gone a lot longer and maybe still be going today if he had not done this to Trevor. And I thought that was something that was very satisfying for Trevor to see, is that a bully, a rich, famous bully who couldn't take being criticized on the internet by people Trevor didn't even know, tried to make an example of him, tried to file a frivolous lawsuit, tried to get $30K or so out of him, but filed for $5 million, but at minimum was trying for something like $30K, filed a bogus restraining order, filed a frivolous lawsuit, and then got the restraining order, but the lawsuit was going nowhere, and it backfired on him. And not only did it cost him a ton of money, but he ended up losing his show out of it for the reasons I stated. So there was no more show, and it's all because of this thing he tried to do to Trevor. So really, this is like a David versus Goliath thing, and David won. That was very satisfying for me to see happen. This was just a complete abuse of the legal system. And I remember seeing it and going, this really sucks that people who have money or connections can just file these frivolous suits and also frivolous restraining orders and really make things hell for just ordinary people who haven't done anything wrong. And even though the anti-SLAPP is there to protect against it, it still costs a lot of money to even get there, and you have to format all of that right. You can't just walk in as an individual yourself and try to defend it. You usually won't win. So it's not as simple as it looks. So I was glad that was the result. I wanted to tell you guys this story because it does involve an LA area celebrity who's, by the way, he's well known enough around the country that either Family Guy or American Dad did a little gag about Tom Leykis on there. So obviously he's known well enough for that. And yeah, it's pretty sad. And these days what Tom Leykis is doing is just tweeting anti-Trump stuff.
Everybody started calling him on other shows. And that was you. He was on a different show. Who are these people? Can't you get rid of them? No.
Like after this was all going on, some of Trevor's fans were calling up and pranking those other shows to taunt Tom about this whole thing. And, hey, do you try to sue old ladies with dementia? Because Tom didn't want to talk about that. He was posturing this whole thing about the supposed deranged fan stalking him, and he got a restraining order against him. He did not ever want it known that he sued an old lady with dementia who didn't know he existed for stalking him. That's what he did. He really sued an old lady with dementia who didn't know he existed. And he knew that. And I told them that. They can't even claim that they weren't told this because I told them that Trevor's mom does not know who Tom is. And I was told, no, we think she does. We think she was part of this. I'm like, I can't believe this. And I didn't believe them. I knew they were just saying this because they wanted to justify what they were doing to try to make an example of someone they thought was part of that group criticizing Tom. So that was all really bad. I felt very bad for Trevor as it was going on. But I will say I feel worse for Trevor now because unfortunately, Trevor, he was diagnosed, how long was it, like 3 weeks ago or so?
6, 7 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago, he found out that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And, that you don't come back from that, unfortunately. And when this is what killed Steve Jobs at 55. And so unfortunately, Trevor and Patrick Swayze. And so it doesn't matter how rich or famous you are or what medical care you have access to at this point in time when you have pancreatic cancer, which is almost always late stage because it hides very well into the early stages, so you don't catch it early. And once you find out you've got pancreatic cancer, you basically just have to say goodbye. So, Trevor's making the best of it here. He's been talking to all his friends, including me, and people have been coming down and visiting him. And he's making the most of his time left here. He's physically in a lot of pain, as you might imagine, with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I appreciate him doing this segment with me, which I'm pre-recording here from the hospital and played on one of the shows upcoming.
I'll throw this in. At my stage where I've got pancreatic cancer, I'm going to say something Tom Leykis. Tom Leykis, I forgive you. Tom Leykis, I did like you a lot. And Tom Leykis, I think you're a coward. But anyways, going out, Tom, I wish the best for you, and for Dino and Gary.
That's pretty forgiving of you. I don't think I would. If I were you, I would not. I wouldn't have forgave anybody. I know some people are more forgiving than I am. But, yeah, yeah. Trevor just said he wouldn't carry as an atheist anyway. But so that was very unfortunate abuse of the legal system, and then very unfortunate that Trevor turns out he has pancreatic cancer now. And
I don't want to go out holding grudges.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go out holding grudges. He just said, and I can understand that. You might wonder, given that I said Trevor has been a heavy drinker for just about all his life, is that the reason he has pancreatic cancer? Because he's only 59 years old, so obviously he's going to be passing away much sooner than he expected. Is it the fault of the drinking? And I actually looked this up because I had wondered if that were the case, and it seems like this is inconclusive. There have been some beliefs that could possibly do it, but at the same time, there is not research indicating that this has to do with pancreatic cancer and that it may not be connected.
I believe it's the drinking that caused the diabetes, which caused my vascular problems, which caused my nerve damage. I got nerves age of like a 70, 80-year-old man. And all of it just all in one bailiwick, put it all together, it's like, that's what caused it. It caused my lifestyle, caused it. And but you can't get proof it caused it, but look, I did it to myself, and I'm ready to, I accept it. Except Tom Leykis, I still don't want to have the grudges against you,
Yeah, I'll say this for Trevor. Most of you guys don't know him, but he was someone who lived life on his own terms. And a lot of times they say that about someone as they're after they pass away, but he really did. This is someone who hasn't had a 9-to-5 job in decades, and he He basically had fun and lived his life the way he wanted, including the drinking. And he always hustled to make money. He sold radio ads. He sold baseball cards. He was very good at sales, Trevor. Really good at all kinds of sales. And he just made money for himself and kept himself supported. He was never a rich guy, but he always was able to support himself and the lifestyle he wanted to have.
Never wanted for anything.
Yeah, he did. He was someone who always could afford to do everything he wanted to do and just every day wanted to enjoy life. He said, I don't ever want to just live life in a way where I'm not enjoying every day. So I told him, when I heard about this pancreatic cancer, and I'm very sad to hear about the diagnosis, I said, at least you're not one of the people who was a workaholic and was working at a job you hated, looking forward to being 65, and then you get this and you realize you're not going to make it. At least you, for the last few decades, you lived your life every day the way you wanted to. And I said, you can feel good about that was the decision you made. And doing the show he did, and I'll tell you, the show kind of established like a community. Like there's a lot of people now that got to know each other or know each other better through Trevor's Happy Hour, that are friends, that they care about Trevor. Some of them have come down to see him, including some that hadn't actually met him in person before.
Who died? Or that guy, the BJ or something?
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
A lot of my callers have died.
Unfortunately, I'll say this though, health-wise, the people associated with the show were not particularly lucky. A guy named BJ died of COVID in 2020. And Dave Lehrman, you remember him, he's appeared on Poker Fraud Alert Radio before. He was part of that whole community, and he was my friend as well, and he passed away at 55. And that was kind of mysterious. We don't exactly know what killed Dave, but we've been discussing it since what happened to Trevor, and we kind of think that Dave Lehrman did, he may have had cancer and just hid it from everybody.
Victorville Dave.
Yeah, and then there's a guy named Victorville Dave who was kind of peripherally part of the group, and he was very obese, so it wasn't that surprising that he was like 700 pounds, but he passed away at like age 46, it's like I think in 2018. So yeah, a number of people have passed away, and unfortunately Trevor, his time is going to come soon as well. So that's been unfortunate. By the way, if you are familiar with autistic Canadian weather guy Frankie McDonald, who has kind of a cult following on the internet, he is actually part of this community, and we even had Frankie make a little custom Poker Fraud Alert shout out that Trevor asked him to do. Frankie doesn't really know me very well, but Trevor asked him to do it, and we actually made it for Sonatine, who is a forum member that liked to post Frankie videos and didn't even realize that we knew him. So he was shocked when there was a custom video made for Sonatine by Frankie. He couldn't believe it because I had a connection to Frankie through Trevor's show, and Frankie's been very active in this whole group.
I tried him at McDonald's.
That's right. The original co-host of Trevor's Happy Hour was a guy he met at McDonald's. This guy named Lyle that he just met at McDonald's and said at the drive-thru and said, "You know what? I think you'd be good on the radio." And the funny thing is, Lyle was kind of like a good sidekick co-host type.
It was like, yeah, Lyle. I just picked these people out of nowhere. They were just like people that I saw, like Christian Berman. She has Asperger's, and I looked at her. She was asking for people to buy her drawings, and I liked them, and I said, yeah, can you do I paid her $250 to do caricatures of the people of my show, and they're up on my website. So it's just anybody that, do I have just weird people on my show? No, I guess I gravitate towards people that are like this, and they all seem to get along together, most of them.
One thing that's interesting is that, as Trevor mentioned, a lot of people who are associated with the show, there's a lot of kind of oddball, unusual people. Frankie McDonald's a good example of it, but they all kind of get along, they all kind of understand each other. And Trevor's like a very inclusive guy. Like he just, if he kind of just notices you, or you kind of wanted to be part of everything, he doesn't say, "Go away, I don't want you to be part of this," or you're not good enough for me. Like no matter how strange they are, or unusual they are, or whatever strange mannerisms they might have, like he welcomes them into the fold, and it makes them feel good that they're part of the whole thing. And it kind of was like a little family he created there all these years. And that's why, a lot of people are very sad. I know most of the listeners here don't know Trevor, but as soon as I heard he was sick like this, I thought, I for sure have to do like a interview with him about the Leykis thing, and also just kind of to introduce him to the audience. And this is someone that I knew separate from the poker and gambling world, so that's why you guys don't know him, but I think about this a lot. I think about what's happened to Trevor a lot. It makes me very sad that, one day soon he's not going to be here anymore, and he's only 59. And you never know when your time's coming. You never know when it's going to be done for you. And sometimes you can even do everything right. I know Trevor didn't exactly live a healthy lifestyle, but this didn't necessarily have to happen. And a lot of times people really do live healthy lifestyles, and something like this gets them anyway. In fact, pancreatic cancer, some people believe, and when I say some people, I mean like researchers and doctors, some believe it is almost completely random, and it's just going to come for you if you're unlucky. So that may have really been what happened to him. There may have been a cause plus being unlucky. We'll never know. It can't exactly tell us. But yeah, it's a sad moment here. And, I came in here and I saw how Trevor looks, and he looks, he looks like he's sick. He's low energy. He's lying in the hospital bed, and just close the door of this room, and we're doing this segment here. And, when this is over, I'm going to go back, probably make a stopover at a poker room because it happens to be on the way back to where I live. And but yeah, it's going to be sad. And when Trevor's actually really gone, whatever day that happens, that it's going to affect me a lot. I'm going to feel very saddened by this, and I'm glad I got to know Trevor and got to be friends with him. And this is sad. It's going to be strange when he's gone, when he's just not there anymore. And in fact, there's a picture of me, Trevor, and Dave Lerman that's been posted on the Poker Fraud Alert forum. And that's strange for me to think about because, this is taken I think 2013 or so. And pretty soon I'm going to be the only one left in that photo. And no one in that photo was old. So it's just really sad to think about. So anyway, Trevor, thank you for coming on here in the condition you are. And, I hope you have as much time left as possible, and that you can at least enjoy whatever time you have left here and make the most of it. And I'm glad you are at least, seeing people and talking to people and not just lying away from everybody and living your final days alone.
I can lie here alone, or I can lie here with somebody doing this. Might as well, time moves on, might as well do something with it positive. And that's the way I feel,
Yeah, and that's a good attitude to have, and that's what I would be doing. If I were given a diagnosis like this, maybe one day I will, I would want to use that time valuably. And I always wondered, what would I rather have killing me? Would I rather a heart attack that just abruptly kills me, or cancer where it's slow and painful, but at least I know it's coming and can say goodbye to everybody? And I still think I'd rather have the cancer because at least you have time to, just connect with everybody and reflect and let them know what they meant to you. And I know it sucks knowing what's coming, and the pain and illness really sucks. I just know from Trevor is saying, he said to me that he wouldn't even want to live a really long time feeling like this, and I can understand that. So anyway, I hope with whatever meds they can give you that you can live out the remainder of your life at least semi-pleasantly. And, all of us are going to be thinking about you the whole way and communicating with you the whole way. And I'm sure more people will come down to see you. In fact, I'd come down more often if I wasn't. I don't live anywhere near here, so I had to drive some distance to get over here. But I knew I had to do this. So anyway, Trevor, thanks for appearing on here. And I'm sure the listeners will get a kick out of this whole story.
I'll say one other thing. I grew up in a Christian, Lutheran school. And everybody's been touting Jesus to me, get right with God and all that. I do believe there's a higher power up there. I think it's God, but you can believe what you want. But someone's pulling the strings. I believe it. I don't know if you do, but that's how I feel. And making me do this makes me happy because it's I'm just kind of giving back my life to people. So maybe they can use it for good. Would not do what I did or do what I did. And don't get in a suit with Tom Leykis. It's not a good idea.
and by the way, Trevor he's been very nice and generous with various people who are less fortunate. Again, he's not a rich guy and never has been, but he's been generous with people as well, with time, with money, with effort, with friendship. And yeah, so he's a good guy with a good heart, and it's going to be sad when the world's without him. And sucks the way things go sometimes. So anyway, I'm going to end the segment here, and it's been an hour 15.
Go to YouTube, Trevor's Happy Hour. Go to Trevor Garner on YouTube. Go to Spotify, Trevor's Happy Hour. You can listen to all my shows. And go to the website, trevorshappyhour.com. And you can see pictures of what we did. It'd be going through bars and hanging out with women. A lot of it's a facade, but I had a lot of fun.
You'll even see a picture of me on there with giving a thumbs up from the Rio during the World Series of Poker, just in my room, with a Travis Happy Hour shirt on. And for some reason, my beard looks red, which I never understood. My beard is not red. It's never been red, but it actually looks red in that picture. I have a red beard. But there's a picture of me there you'll see. And Poker Fraudler is listed as the friend of the show. So, yeah. And supposedly the show is going to continue after Trevor is gone with some... the guys who Trevor gave the computer to. And I said I'll be happy to assist with getting that online for them if they need that help. So anyway, thank you, Trevor, for coming on, and I hope the listeners found this interesting. And if you didn't, well, too bad, you've listened anyway.